Before the trip, we were watching a live stream from one of the waterholes nearby, and I really didn't want to let my expectations get too high in case the seasons changed or the animals moved away. I don't know, but I can safely say that since arriving here, it's actually been beyond belief. We've been driving around the salt pan called the Tosha Pan, which is like a giant salt lake, and animals gather along the waterholes around the edges of it. You can see things like giraffes, lions, elephants, rhinos and zebras, and we've already had really close encounters with sometimes hundreds of animals just surrounding the car. There's a baby oncoming. Hi, I'm Ling and I do a lot of art and photography. A few years ago, I must have mentioned that I dreamt of traveling to Africa because a friend gave me this gift. Around then, I also picked up a camera for the very first time. I quietly said that I wanted to try photography, but I didn't have any experience and was surrounded by a lot of people asking very valid questions about how I would make it work. I didn't have answers to any of those questions back then, but I followed my intuition anyway. And I decided to trust that I can always try anything new. This month has been filled with long days under the sun, capturing moments in nature. I would love to share everything that I got to create as a photographer because at one point, only a few years ago, it would have all sounded like an unrealistic dream. So a few years ago while we were traveling, Jason and I picked up an old camera, and since then we really haven't been able to put it down. I feel like we were both so amazed by the places and natural landscapes that we were seeing, and photography became a really big part of how we travel in a very relaxed and natural way. But at the same time, we were really interested in writing a travel blog, and I feel so lucky that it has grown to the point that we have clients who are interested in us taking photos on our next trips. So I thought I could bring you along to the next one because we have nearly a whole month in Africa. We're going to be road tripping ourselves through Namibia and Botswana, and because we don't really have many plans, we should have whole days under the sun just watching animals and exploring all of the landscapes. But while we're there, I also feel very lucky that we get to shoot for some hotels and local tours, and we'll also be taking over some brand work for some hiking and outdoor companies. I think it's going to be such a unique photography trip because there's so much to see, and also wildlife photography is quite new for us. We don't usually pick up new camera gear for our trips, but this time there is going to be a lot of wildlife, so we're taking a huge 200 to 600 millimeter lens. We've already tested it out around the apartment, which has felt kind of creepy because we can see the details on people's clothing up to a kilometer away, and so I just can't even imagine how close it's going to get us to the animals there. I'm very grateful to travel quite a lot, but the majority of my time is at home and most of my work is in writing our travel blog. We can't always do travel photography, but when I have other projects on, I'm still very focused on capturing nature and memories. And before we leave for the trip, we have a lot of shoots on in Sydney. Today we're going to a store opening for a brand that we'll be creating content for in Africa. We're going to take videos for our Instagram stories, and I'll use my phone to capture everything. We're going into the city for this launch, and I actually can't wait to shoot this campaign. It's focused on outdoor adventure, and we have the perfect place in Namibia in mind for it. I'm imagining the desert and climbing up sand dunes. Today we're going to photograph a wedding in a cinema, and we're also guests at the event. The most important things for us to pack are a flash, many SD cards and spare batteries, a Polaroid camera and a portrait lens. Jace is photographing the event with me, so we'll share this telephoto lens as well. This ended up being one of our favourite events to capture, and I can't wait to show our friends the photos. We're going to shoot an outdoor campaign for another brand today. For the last few years, we've mostly used one camera and one lens, and I feel like this combination is still perfect for travel photography and for nearly everything that we want to capture. Today we'll use it for landscape and product shots around the beaches. We're so lucky with the weather, and I love being able to spend time in all of these places near home. I have the next 4 days to edit all of the photos and videos from these shoots. I'd normally have a lot longer to put everything together, including a whole wedding album, but I really need to send them out before we go, so I'm spending a lot of time inside on my laptop. This week has been so full, and I think the tricky thing about freelancing photography and probably freelancing in anything is that it's really hard to predict when things are going to be on throughout the year, and it can also be hard to tell when work is going to come up. On some weeks there might be absolutely nothing at all, and on others everything just piles up at once. I think because these are all creative things that I've always wanted to do, I really don't procrastinate at all, and I'm just grateful to be able to have the experience. But I did have my other office job on top of all of this, and ideally it could have been a bit more spaced out because I am so tired now. But it's okay because we've got in there. I'm sending off the album, we've picked up the products, so we're going to shoot in Africa. I've posted stories from the launch, and I'll be sending a draft video back to the other client, and then we can finally pack and get ready for the next trip. The trip itself is completely open, and to be honest, we don't have many plans. We've been constantly checking a live stream from one of the waterholes and wondering if it can possibly be real. I've also clicked around on Google Maps a lot, and I'm determined to visit some of the most wild and remote places we've seen. I don't think I mentioned this yet, but Jace is actually going to be driving us like our own private safari, and we'll just have to see how that goes. What on earth? After a long flight and the longest drive, we made it up to Etosha National Park in Namibia. I didn't expect to see so many animals right away, but they are just completely surrounding our car. There isn't much time left until sunset, but a group of elephants is coming towards our lodge, so we're going to try and meet them at the water. We've been getting up before sunrise and trying to see as much as possible. The strangest thing has been watching different animals interact with each other. Everyone moves out of the way when elephants arrive to bathe, and elephants stand guard when lions arrive to drink. At first, we were so focused on the behaviors of the herds, but we've started using the camera to see each animal individually, and every now and then they look back. Don't want to alarm anyone, but there's a pride of lions right next to the car. We've come to the most beautiful lodge inside Etosha National Park. I've honestly never been anywhere like this. We're spending around 10 hours in the car here each day, driving ourselves around the salt pan and watching all of the wildlife until after sunset. By the time we get to our next lodge, we're usually too tired to look through any of the photos, but as soon as we got to this one, I rushed to check just one among thousands to see if the animals really had lined up in layers above the waterhole. Everything's starting to look different as we drive to the coast. We had the longest day of driving yesterday, going from Etosha down to the coast in Walvis Bay. It's about 580 kilometers and it took us around 6 hours. And while we were in Etosha, we were also spending most of the day inside the car, probably like 8 hours a day, just driving around trying to see as many animals as possible. So now that we've come to the coast, we're by the ocean and sand dunes. It's very beautiful. And I think we're going to just take a few days here to really reflect on everything that we got to see. We actually need a few days to recover from all of the early starts and long drives, so we've decided to spend some time catching up and processing everything we've just seen. After just a few days in Namibia, we've taken thousands of photos. I've started editing a few of our favorite ones, and we're thinking about how we could turn them into prints when we get home. We both started photography with the intention of capturing our memories, and I think because that's still the main motivation, we're not always looking at our photos from a very technical point of view, but on this trip I really have to remind myself of how much we have learned and how happy I am with all of these as photos too. We've had some time to rest and I'm going to use up all of my energy again. As soon as we started planning this trip, I was so excited to reach some of the most unique natural landscapes, and we organized to shoot one of our campaigns for an activewear brand here. We've waited for a clear sunset and we're going to climb the tallest sand dune in Namibia. When I first started photography, I was so inspired by experiences in nature like this, and I'm so grateful for the chance to be here and be able to create out in the open. At over 380 meters high, Dune 7 completely took our breath away. We made it to the peak after the steepest climb and saw its edges slipping in the wind. There's an idea that Julia Cameron shared which I think can really help with any creative dream. She said, "People frequently believe the creative life is grounded in fantasy. The more difficult truth is that creativity is grounded in reality, in the particular, the focused, the well-observed, or specifically imagined. And I think it's nice to see your dreams as being already grounded in reality." This is the road to Sossusvlei and driving into the world's oldest desert. It quickly reaches 40 degrees by midday, so we're making the most of each morning by exploring the desert while we can. On some trips, we can see animals lining up with the sand dunes. On others, we will climb into the dunes themselves. But as soon as the sun is too high, we go back to the oasis at our lodge. Through our travel blog, we were invited to stay at Sossusvlei Lodge, which is at the gateway to the Namib Desert. While we're here, we're going to spend a few days taking photos and videos around their accommodation. We just checked in and it already feels so remote. We're just near the gateway to the national park. There's mountains all around, and as soon as we arrived, there was an oryx just outside our lodge. And the main reason we're here is to see the incredible natural landscapes near Sossusvlei and Deadvlei. Deadvlei is the first one which inspired us to come to Namibia. It's one of those places that just doesn't seem real. It's a giant salt pan with huge sand dunes around it, and the trees here have been preserved for nearly 1,000 years. The next day we climbed above Deadvlei until every part of the landscape was no longer recognizable. Other people were tiny dots on the ridges. The preserved trees were far off in the distance, and we were completely surrounded by dunes. I don't know if you can tell from this, but that's where we parked our car, and we've now climbed all the way up onto this ridge. This is what the view looks like around us. It still feels like a long way to go, but Jace is nearly at the top. From up here, the only thing I can hear now is the wind. After a few weeks of road tripping around Namibia, we've come to Botswana and we're surrounded by the ancient baobab forest. On this part of the trip, we'll travel to Victoria Falls and shoot a campaign for one of the tour companies. Afterwards, we'll make our way down to the Makgadikgadi Pan, which is one of the largest salt pans in the world. There's migrations of zebras and flamingos during the wet season, but we've come at a completely different time when the surface is dry, so we should get the unique opportunity to actually sleep out on the pan itself. In Namibia, we saw a lot of elephants inside the national parks, but in Botswana, they're roaming around everywhere. It's only the first morning, and all I did was walk out of the bathroom and this one suddenly appeared. When we plan a trip, we sometimes work with tour companies to take photos or videos, and on this one, we have the unbelievable chance to see Victoria Falls, which we can reach in a day trip from Botswana. We weren't anywhere near the falls when I started to hear them. As we got closer, we walked into a thick mist that came from water crashing 100 meters below. I know that my grandparents have been here before. My grandmother even painted the falls, but unfortunately her memory is fading and I can't ask her about it anymore. But we decided to try to visit for ourselves, to see what they had seen, and to always make the most of each day. We got to take photos for a scenic flight tour company while we were here, and this is how they turned out. We made it to the wildest part of the trip, where the plan is to drive into the middle of Botswana, head into the desert on the bumpiest road ever, stop for baby giraffes and meerkats, then find the Makgadikgadi salt pan where you can actually sleep out in the open. The strangest thing about this whole experience was that we were completely immersed in nature. There was no light except for the moon and stars. From where we slept, we couldn't hear the fire crackling, so there was also no noise except for the wind. We woke up to the most vibrant sunrise and ate breakfast with no one else around. This was definitely one of the hardest parts of the trip to organise, but it was also the most memorable experience. I'll make sure that whenever we write our blog posts from Africa, they'll all be linked below so it's easier for you to get to all of these places too. Our last few days in Botswana were a complete blur because we tried to fit in as much as possible. We got up early every morning just for the chance to see more elephants, kudu and lions before we went home. When we got home, I decided to write a list of memories from the trip that I don't want to forget. Now that we're home, we can also chat more about what I'll do with all of our photos and the business side of photography. I really love getting back from a trip and having so many photos to look through to just relive all of it. And I'm noticing so many different things in all of the footage. I think when we were in Africa and looking at wildlife, I was always so focused on elephants because they're so dominating and like 5 meters tall. So it was really hard to look away from them. But now that I can actually have more time to go through the footage, I'm seeing a lot more in every scene, and I'm so happy with how all of the photos and videos came out. So usually the first thing that I do when I get back from a trip is sort through all of the photos and back them up onto hard drives. It probably sounds really routine and boring, but organizing the photos is the most important thing, not just for myself, but usually with our photography, we have clients who want to license images and videos from certain places, and they often have a very specific brief in mind. So it might be something like Namibia in the dry season, the deserts of Sossusvlei, or even hotels around Africa. So I really need to be able to find footage and photos quickly to suit any new campaign that comes up. I also love to print out a photo album when we get home, and I think it's so nice to have physical copies that we can look through anytime. So I find a lot of my photo albums from a paper store in Melbourne called Kami, and they're like artworks in themselves because they are hand bound and have all been silk screened on the most beautiful paper. So the next thing that we'll do with our photos is choose a few of them to turn into prints for our store. I really love the process of going through our whole collection and trying to find the most eye-catching or dramatic natural landscapes or wildlife shots. And we did take a lot of photos because we were shooting for maybe 8 to 10 hours a day inside the national park. So there are a lot of shots to choose from, but I think we've narrowed it down into 2 categories. The first one will be animals looking over the shoulder of other animals because there was just that many animals around in one shot. And the second one will be photos of animals looking back at the camera. We've been turning our photos into prints for a little while, and so far they've usually been of Australian landscapes. And I think the most rewarding thing is knowing that someone has connected with something we've taken enough to want to have it in their home. And every now and then I remember how wild it is that our photography is just in people's living areas and something that they could be looking at every day. For this collection, we've worked really hard to find a framer for orders in Australia, and I'm so happy with the result because we've managed to find the perfect floating canvas frames. All of the wood is sustainably sourced and it has this really beautiful natural finish. When we get back, we also start thinking about whether there are any blog posts that we want to write from that destination, and I really love having our own website and blog because it's the perfect combination of creativity for me. I love taking photos, editing photos, and writing, and I know that having a blog was something I wanted from our very first trip together, and it's been really nice to see it grow over the years. The only thing is that it takes quite a long time to put together any article that we write. There's so much research that goes into it, a lot of writing and editing, and also a lot of reflection on information that we kind of had to get just by experiencing the trip itself. But eventually we will have everything up, from the hotels we stayed in, the best tours, and how we were able to self-drive around Namibia and Botswana. I think the best thing about having a blog is that I can see where people are going to travel through things like our web traffic or bookings that they make. And we also get messages all the time from people who are visiting places that we went to, especially when they say that our blog was helpful or that they followed some of our recommendations. And it's just so uplifting to think about people having a great time in places that we absolutely loved. So the last thing I can mention with travel photography is that sometimes you can't predict the opportunities that are going to come up until you actually start creating. We've been really lucky to have some clients who happen to have plans for campaigns as we're going somewhere, and we're able to show them the locations that we have in mind and shoot while we're traveling. But a lot of the time we're really just recording for ourselves and our own memories, and we're then lucky to have some clients who are interested in the footage later. So that includes some things I mentioned, like licensing photos or videos for marketing campaigns, but we've also had some clients that we've worked with for a really long period of time, and we've been able to show them the footage as we go. So there's one in particular that wanted videos from trips like South Korea, the Cook Islands, and China, and I'm so grateful that they've come back again with a huge interest in everything we were capturing in Africa this time. So over the next few weeks, I'll be able to storyboard some ideas with them, write a script for a voiceover, and kind of naturally talk about how we still use their product on all of our trips. And I really love this process of creating even after the trip is done, using all the footage that we've already taken to tell another story. My grandparents used to have a wooden zebra on their bookshelf, and I realized that they must have picked it up on their own trip to Africa. I also found a painting that my grandma did of Victoria Falls. Unfortunately, her memory and eyesight is fading, so she wouldn't actually be able to see this anymore. I also found photos of my grandfather with a video camera that he carried everywhere. His footage was always very shaky and usually taken from a moving car, but it was always so nice to see the roads they followed somewhere in the world. I love the idea that they recorded and painted so many things that they experienced, and I realized that I'm really just doing the same thing now with art and photography. Jason and I didn't actually pick up a camera until after my grandpa passed away, so we can't tell him how it's going, but I can always thank him for showing me what it's like to live with constant curiosity. A few years ago, I tried to make a lot of changes in my life to live more intentionally and creatively, and I feel like travel photography has brought such a nice balance because you need to be completely present. There's really nothing else that you can do while shooting when you're just waiting for things to naturally unfold, and I absolutely love what we've been able to capture and all of the experiences that have come with it. There are also so many opportunities that I couldn't have predicted when I first picked up a camera, and there are so many different ways to go about travel photography, so I hope that this has helped to maybe give some ideas on where to start. If you are thinking about starting photography, I can guarantee that you will find a way to learn more as you go, and there will always be opportunities that you never could have predicted. You don't need to be able to say what they are yet. And if you really don't know what to capture, just trust that you will find more stories to tell, and there'll be ones that can't be told by anyone else. If you've watched this video, thank you so much for spending this time here. It would be great if you could subscribe to this channel for more stories, and in the meantime, I hope you've been able to slow down and enjoy these moments in nature.